Between 1975 and 1991,
All that a woman should be, and I dedicate my
16 years of R&B produced ballads so perfectly constructed, so emotionally complete,
and we both.
that they didn't just soundtrack moments in people's lives. They became the moments themselves, playing at the wedding, the quiet drive home,
Always and forever.
the late night when the words wouldn't come, but the melody said everything.
Came to me that somehow
These aren't just beautiful songs, they are the product of studio sessions where something extraordinary happened by accident,
is just like a dream.
of writers who sat down to finish a job and accidentally reached something eternal, and of singers who opened their mouths and somehow made the whole world stop moving for 3.5 minutes. Today on Rhythm Origins, we're counting down the 10 most beautiful R&B songs from 1975 to 1991. And we're saving number 1 for the man who recorded a song so quietly devastating, so deliberately simple, that it has been played at more weddings, more funerals, and more moments of unbearable longing than almost any other piece of music from the entire era. Number 10, Free, Deniece Williams, 1977. Deniece Williams spent years as a backing vocalist in Stevie Wonder's touring group Wonderlove, before anyone outside the music industry knew her name. Singing harmonies behind one of the most celebrated voices in American music, while developing a vocal instrument of her own that Wonder himself recognized as something genuinely extraordinary, which is why, when he co-produced her debut album This Is Deniece in 1976, alongside the legendary arranger Charles Stepney, the project felt less like a label investment and more like an act of genuine artistic advocacy from one of the most powerful men in R&B, making sure a voice the world hadn't heard yet finally got the platform it deserved. Free was the centerpiece of that debut, a soaring, orchestrated declaration of emotional liberation that gave Williams room to showcase a soprano range capable of ascending into registers that most pop and R&B vocalists could not reach without technical compromise. And the song's arrangement, built by Stepney with sweeping strings and an unhurried pace that trusted the lyric rather than fighting for attention over it, was one of the last major works Stepney would complete before his sudden death in May 1976, giving the recording a quiet emotional significance that neither Williams nor Wonder could have anticipated when they walked into the studio. The song peaked at number 2 on the R&B chart and introduced Deniece Williams to an audience that would follow her career through Grammy-winning performances for decades. But it was the production environment of that debut, Stevie Wonder essentially standing behind a largely unknown vocalist and saying with his name and his time that this person deserved to be heard, that made the existence of Free feel like the beginning of something that went well beyond its chart position. Free represents one of the most underappreciated origin stories in the history of late 70s R&B, a song recorded by a woman who had spent her career making other people sound better than they might have without her, finally being given a microphone of her own, a full orchestra underneath her, and a production team that understood exactly what she was capable of, and refused to ask her to be anything less than the full, extraordinary version of it. Number 9. After the Love Has Gone, Earth, Wind and Fire, 1979. After the Love Has Gone was written by David Foster, Jay Graydon, and Bill Champlin, none of whom were members of Earth, Wind and Fire. As a sophisticated jazz-influenced soul ballad that the three songwriters had developed independently and brought to Maurice White as a submission for the album I Am. At a moment when Earth, Wind and Fire's sound was publicly associated with horn-driven funk, cosmic theatricality, and the kind of high-energy concert spectacle that had made them one of the biggest live acts in the world, which meant that a stripped-down, introspective ballad about the quiet end of love was not the obvious next move for a band whose live show included a full levitation illusion. Maurice White heard the demo and reportedly loved it without reservation, overriding any industry instinct that suggested the arrangement was too sophisticated or too piano-driven for the audience that had come to expect something sonically bigger from EWF and producer David Foster. To become one of the most commercially dominant producers in the history of adult contemporary music, has credited that session with being one of the most naturally fluid recording experiences of his early career. Philip Bailey's falsetto vocal settling over the arrangement, as though the song had been written with his voice in its blueprint from the beginning. After the Love Has Gone won the Grammy Award for Best Rhythm and Blues Song at the 1980 Grammy Awards, becoming one of the rare instances where a song written by three outsiders for a band with an established sound produced the most critically honored moment of that band's commercial peak. And the production choice to let the arrangement breathe, to let the space in the music be as present as the notes, is what continues to make this recording feel timeless rather than merely successful. The song reached number 2 on the R&B chart and the top 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, and its Grammy victory was received in the industry as a signal that Earth, Wind & Fire's musical range was broader and more emotionally nuanced than even their most devoted fans had understood. A signal Maurice White had been trying to send for years before David Foster walked into his recording session with exactly the song that could say it. Number 8. Never Knew Love Like This Before. Stephanie Mills, 1980. Stephanie Mills was 16 years old when she auditioned for the Broadway musical The Wiz in 1974. The all-black retelling of The Wizard of Oz that would become one of the most celebrated productions in the history of American theater. And she was still a teenager when she originated the role of Dorothy on Broadway in 1975. Performing 8 shows a week at the Majestic Theater and receiving reviews that described her voice as one of the most powerful and emotionally mature instruments to grace the Broadway stage in a generation. At an age when most of her peers were still finishing high school without any particular career plan. By 1980, when Never Knew Love Like This Before was recorded and released as a single from her album Sweet Sensation, Mills had spent 5 years building a recording career that had not yet fully translated the theatrical impact of her Broadway breakthrough into the mainstream commercial success her talent clearly warranted. And the song, written by James Mtume and Reggie Lucas, the same songwriting duo who had been working simultaneously with Phyllis Hyman at Arista Records, gave her vocal instrument exactly the kind of lush, unhurried production context in which it could show the full range of what she was capable of without having to compete with an arrangement for space. The song peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. And at the 23rd Grammy Awards in 1981, it won the Grammy Award for Best Female R&B Vocal Performance. The first major recording industry recognition of a vocal gift that Broadway audiences had been aware of for half a decade before the commercial music world caught up with what the live theater community already knew. The irony embedded in Never Knew Love Like This Before, winning Stephanie Mills a Grammy in 1981, is the specific emotional distance between the song's lyric, about discovering for the first time what real love feels like, and the fact that Mills, who had been working professionally since her mid-teens and had given everything to her craft for years without commercial reward at the level her talent deserved, was herself finally experiencing what it felt like to receive the recognition that the song described, both at the same moment. Number 7. Just the Two of Us. Grover Washington Jr. feat. Bill Withers, 1981. Grover Washington Jr. had spent the 1970s almost single-handedly creating the commercial template for what would eventually be called Quiet Storm R&B. The sophisticated fusion of jazz instrumentation and soul sensibility that made his recordings feel more intimate than standard jazz, and more musically serious than standard pop. Built for an adult audience that wanted something with the emotional directness of R&B, but the harmonic complexity of jazz, without having to choose between the two. And by 1981, when he recorded the Wine Light album that contained Just the Two of Us, he had established himself as the preeminent artist, in a lane that most of the industry was only beginning to understand how to market. Bill Withers, who wrote Just the Two of Us, with William Salter and Ralph MacDonald, was at the time one of the most respected singer-songwriters in American music.
Good things might come to the
Best known for Lean on Me, Ain't No Sunshine, and Lovely Day, and the story of how he came to sing on what became Grover Washington's commercial and artistic peak is one of the more casually extraordinary origin stories in the R&B catalog. Withers was not originally planned as the vocalist, and his contribution was assembled in a recording session whose straightforward simplicity, the lyric itself was essentially a love letter, delivered over a jazz soul groove, belied the enormous commercial impact of what they were building together in that studio.
I hear the crystal raindrops fall on the window.
Just the Two of Us reached the top 5 on the Billboard Hot 100, won the Grammy Award for Best R&B Song and Best Jazz Fusion Performance
Spend some time with you. Just the
at the 24th Grammy Awards in 1982, and became the cornerstone of the Quiet Storm format that would define adult R&B radio programming for the following decade, essentially proving with its commercial success that there was a massive audience for sophisticated, jazz-influenced black music if the industry would simply create the radio format to deliver it. The song has been sampled and covered hundreds of times in the decades since its release, most notably by Will Smith in 1998, in a tribute to his son, which introduced Just the Two of Us to an entirely new generation without diminishing anything about the original. A testament to how completely the core of what Grover Washington and Bill Withers built together in 1981 transcended the specific era in which it was made. Number 6, Endless Love, Diana Ross and Lionel Richie, 1981. Lionel Richie was already one of the most commercially successful songwriters in American music by 1981. He had written Lady for Kenny Rogers, which spent 6 weeks at number 1 on the Hot 100, and Sail On and other Commodore's hits, but he was still primarily understood by the mainstream as a member of a group rather than as a fully formed solo commercial force. And when director Franco Zeffirelli approached him about writing the title track for the 1981 film Endless Love, the resulting recording was intended to be a showcase for Diana Ross rather than a duet. Diana Ross heard the early version of what Richie had written and reportedly told him directly that the song was too beautiful to sing alone, that the lyric needed a second voice to represent the male perspective of the love story the film was building, and that if he wasn't going to find someone else to sing it with her, then he was going to have to do it himself. A conversation that Richie has recounted in various interviews over the years as the gentle, generous push from a more established artist that redirected the entire arc of his solo career. The single spent 9 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making it the longest-running number 1 of 1981, and was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song. And more significantly for Richie's trajectory, its commercial performance demonstrated to the industry and to Richie himself that his voice carried the same commercial gravity as his songwriting, opening the door for the solo career that would produce Truly, Hello, Say You Say Me, and 3 consecutive Album of the Year Grammy nominations. The film Endless Love received mixed reviews and has not endured as a significant piece of American cinema. but the song that carries its name has outlasted not just the critical conversation around the movie, but virtually every other R&B duet released in the same calendar year, which is, in its own quiet way, the most accurate measurement of what Diana Ross understood about what Lionel Richie had written that he had not yet fully understood himself. Number 5. Can You Stand the Rain? New Edition, 1988. By the time New Edition walked into the studio with producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis in 1988 to record the Heartbreak album, they had already experienced the very specific kind of internal rupture that destroys most groups permanently. Bobby Brown, their most visually electric and commercially energetic member, had either left or been pushed out of the group, depending on which account you choose to believe, and the industry's collective expectation was that a New Edition, without the person who had generated the most individual mainstream attention, was a commercially diminished proposition, not an artistic opportunity. Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, who had already transformed Janet Jackson's career with the Control album 2 years earlier, and who understood better than almost anyone in the industry how to channel group tension into creative focus, wrote Can You Stand the Rain? Specifically to showcase what New Edition's harmonies could do without any single voice dominating the arrangement. And the song's central question, asking a lover whether their commitment was strong enough to endure difficulty, was informed by the same emotional register of loyalty and uncertainty that every remaining member of the group was living through in real time with their own professional relationships. Johnny Gill, who joined the group as Bobby Brown's replacement, contributed a vocal presence that complemented Ralph Tresvant's tenor with remarkable precision, and the 4-part vocal blend that opens Can You Stand the Rain? Unaccompanied harmonies before the production comes in, is one of the most deliberately beautiful opening statements on any R&B record of the decade. Can You Stand the Rain peaked at number 1 on the R&B chart and reached the top 20 on the Billboard Hot 100. And the Heartbreak album was critically recognized as the finest artistic achievement of New Edition's entire catalog, which is a remarkable outcome for a project that the industry had framed as the beginning of the group's decline before a single note of it had been recorded. Number 4. Always. Atlantic Starr, 1987. Atlantic Starr was a family band in the most literal possible sense. The group's core creative team was the Lewis brothers, Jonathan, Wayne, and David, who had been writing and producing together since their teens, and who built Atlantic Starr around their collective songwriting instincts, rather than around any single vocalist. Cycling through lead singers across their career, as the group's sound evolved through the late 70s and 80s.
It must have been sent from up above.
Barbara Weathers had joined the group in 1984 as their featured vocalist, and Always, written by David Lewis for the 1987 album All in the Name of Love, was the song that gave her voice the exact showcase that the entire rest of her tenure with the group had been building toward. A sweeping, unhurried love ballad with a lyric so straightforwardly devoted and so completely unironic in its commitment that it asked everything of the vocalist delivering it and gave back everything in return. The song spent 1 week at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of the most played wedding songs of the second half of the 80s, selected as the first dance at black weddings across America, with a frequency that transformed Atlantic Starr from a moderately successful R&B act into a permanent fixture in the soundtrack of a generation's most important romantic ceremonies.
I can't find enough ways to let you know.
The painful footnote to always arriving at that level of cultural saturation is that Barbara Weathers, the voice that made it what it was, left Atlantic Starr after the All in the Name of Love album,
My sweet, let's go make
and the group's subsequent recordings without her never recaptured the commercial and emotional height that Always had reached with her lead vocal specifically. The song has been played at more weddings, anniversaries, and moments of quiet personal commitment than Atlantic Starr or David Lewis could have projected when they finished writing it in 1986. And its presence at the #1 position on the Hot 100 for that single week remains one of the most affectionate commercial endorsements the American listening public has ever delivered to a ballad that asked nothing of them except to believe that love could be unconditional. Number 3. Here and Now, Luther Vandross, 1989. Luther Vandross was playing Pac-Man. That is the documented, confirmed origin story of what became one of the most played wedding songs in the history of Black American music. Because Luther was at home in Los Angeles, playing video games with his friend and musical idol Dionne Warwick, when her son David Elliott arrived to drive her home. Asked Luther if he had a few minutes to hear something, and played him a demo of a ballad he had co-written with songwriter Terry Steele that none of the people in that room could have predicted would become the centerpiece of Luther's career. His first top 10 pop hit, despite nearly a decade of platinum albums, and the Grammy Award winner for Best Male R&B Vocal Performance in 1991. Luther's longtime collaborator Nat Adderley Jr. recalled in a documented studio interview that the demo tape Dionne's son played for Luther that evening was already so well constructed that almost nothing needed to change in the recording. Luther and Adderley added a bridge to give the song lift. Adderley wrote the string arrangement the night before the session at Westlake Studios in Los Angeles, and the recording was essentially complete in a single focused session. With backing vocals contributed by Cissy Houston, the mother of Whitney Houston, and one of the most accomplished backing vocalists in the history of gospel and R&B. The song was released in September 1989 as part of Luther's compilation album, The Best of Luther Vandross. And Here and Now has been described by The Root as no song more synonymous with black weddings. A designation that carries particular weight when you understand that Luther Vandross, who poured his entire professional and creative life into writing and singing about the kind of enduring romantic love the song describes, never experienced that love in his own personal life, which gives the recording a layer of devotion that goes beyond performance and into something closer to longing. Luther died in July 2005, and the engineer on the Here and Now session recalled in the same documented studio retrospective that several days after the recording was complete, a tuxedo arrived at his door with a note from Luther asking him to keep it for when they went to the Grammys together. Which they did, and which stands as one of the more quietly touching examples of the kind of person Luther Vandross was, underneath the extraordinary voice that everyone remembers. Number 2. Always and Forever, Heat Wave, 1977.
with you.
The man who wrote Always and Forever had been working in a frozen food factory in Grimsby, England, before he answered an advertisement in Melody Maker magazine in the mid-1970s that led him to join an international funk and soul band called Heat Wave. And the gap between those two facts, between cleaning fish in an industrial facility in a small English coastal town and writing one of the defining romantic ballads of the late 20th century, is the kind of biographical distance that music history almost never closes but occasionally does.
Every day, love me
And Rod Temperton's story is one of the rare cases where it closed completely. Heatwave was formed in Augsburg, Germany, anchored by American vocalist Johnny Wilder Jr., and built into one of the most genuinely international groups of the era.
When I look at you,
With members from the United States, England, Czechoslovakia, Jamaica, and Switzerland, creating a sound that absorbed all of those influences and produced Always and Forever, from a writing process that producer Barry Blue recalled happening inside a flat so small that Temperton had piles of laundry beside the Wurlitzer piano he wrote on.
there'll always be sunshine.
Trams running in the street outside the window, and the television on top of the organ. Circumstances that produced, in Rod Temperton's own compressed creative process, one of the most sonically lush and emotionally sweeping ballads in the R&B catalog.
You get lonely.
Quincy Jones heard what Temperton had done with Always and Forever, and reached out to recruit him to write for Michael Jackson's Off the Wall album in 1979.
Never change.
And the result was that the same mind that had built a slow dance classic from a keyboard, squeezed beside a pile of washing in a cramped English flat, went on to write Rock With You, Off the Wall, Thriller, the spoken word section for Vincent Price on that same track,
It's just like a dream to me.
and eventually Baby Be Mine, making Rod Temperton one of the most consequential and least publicly visible songwriters in the entire history of pop and R&B. Temperton was known throughout his career as the Invisible Man by the industry professionals who worked alongside him, because he shunned publicity, rarely photographed himself, and consistently gave his gifts to other artists' voices rather than positioning himself as a solo commercial presence. And he died on September 25, 2016, of a rapidly progressing cancer. With the song he wrote beside a pile of laundry, still playing at weddings, still chosen as the slow dance at reunions, and still capable of stopping a room cold from the first chord of Johnny Wilder's opening vocal. Number 1, Ribbon in the Sky, Stevie Wonder, 1982. When Stevie Wonder recorded Ribbon in the Sky in 1982 as one of 4 new songs commissioned for his original Musicarium compilation, he built the recording around the most stripped-down arrangement he had used on a major release in years. Essentially his own voice, a piano, and the specific quality of space that only happens when a producer trusts the emotional weight of a lyric enough to remove everything that isn't necessary to carry it. And the result was a song so nakedly devoted, so architecturally simple, that it did something almost no other R&B record of its era managed to do, which was to feel simultaneously like the most personal thing its creator had ever committed to tape, and like a piece of music that belonged equally to every person who heard it, in the context of their own most important relationship. Stevie has spoken in interviews about Ribbon in the Sky as a song about what he believes love in its truest form should feel and sound like. Not the dramatic declarations of passion that R&B had always been comfortable with, but the quieter, more permanent quality of being genuinely bound to another person across time and circumstance. The kind of commitment that doesn't require a grand gesture because it exists in every ordinary moment, between two people who have decided that nothing matters more than this. And the recording itself enacts that philosophy structurally, because the most powerful moments are not the vocal peaks but the space between the phrases, the silence that holds the lyric before it arrives, the breathing room that Stevie refused to fill with production, because the absence of sound was as much a part of what he was saying as the notes themselves. The song peaked at number 3 on the R&B chart, and was never a massive mainstream pop crossover hit in the conventional sense. And that commercial modesty became part of its legacy, because Ribbon in the Sky built its audience not through radio saturation, but through exactly the mechanism the lyric describes. Person to person, moment to moment, played at weddings by couples who felt that no other 3.5 minutes of recorded music said what they needed to say on the day they were promising their lives to each other. Of all the songs on this countdown, Ribbon in the Sky is the one that asks the least of you on first listen and gives the most back across every subsequent one. And it has been doing that quietly, without spectacle, without a music video that became a cultural moment or a chart position that broke any records. For over 4 decades, which may be the most accurate description of what it sounds like that anyone has ever offered. A song about lasting love that itself lasts, not because of anything the music industry did to support it, but because the people who heard it recognized something true in it and refused to stop playing it.